So this thing that we were just showing you guys is really, it's straight out of this crazy Robin DiAngelo book, White Fragility. It precedes that by a lot. Actually, I found an essay that I wrote from 1991 in which I'm pointing out the pitting of modernity versus postmodernity, which I'll actually share a couple of bits from as well later. So, to those who say, you guys helped create this beast, no, we didn't. We're not copying to that. Just no. But James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, Helen Pluckrose as the people who put together that grievance studies expose, I guess. They don't want to call it a hoax. This precedes DiAngelo, but it's the current Bible of the moment. So in the last episode, I attempted to steelman maybe her most irritating point, right? The idea that all white people are racist. And I said, well, if you understand that she's redefined what racist means, and now what racist means in her world is that you are accruing benefits from an historical system of racism and equality, then it's true. Yes, if you have white skin, you continue to accrue the benefits from an historical system of racism and equality. That is true. But redefining the keyword and the sentiment is cheating. Here are some other things that happen in the book that I hope you don't have to read it, but if you do, she conflates systemic problems, and this is to that redefinition of the word racism. She conflates systemic problems with individual ones, while claiming to be very clear on the differences. So it's kind of it's a bait and switch with regard to the system is rigged and therefore you are racist. Well, no, you can't do that. Individuals and populations are different. She also conflates a biological understanding of humanity, which is part of what we are trying to share with the world, with social Darwinism. So social Darwinism, as a phrase in which both are capitalized, is a long debunked bastardization of Darwinism, which has nothing really to do with an actual evolutionary understanding of the world. But this bastardization, known as social Darwinism, suggests that current social conditions are inevitable and good. It's an excuse for why the rich are rich. The rich are rich because Darwin said so, because nature said so. No, that's wrong, and that's not how evolution works. But she makes this kind of point, and thus slotting scientists like us into this twisted and archaic belief system, she sort of just leaves that for her adherents to come back to. She posits, among other things, that if we are indeed all equal, which many of us believe us to be, the only explanation for disparities in condition must be the result of discrimination. And here she's conflating equal with identical to, right? Equal and identical to are not the same thing. She rails against the way that Black History Month is celebrated because she says it reinforces whiteness. This will not be the first time, if you're reading this book, that you face a dilemma. You can't win. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Should we then not celebrate Black History Month? Well, then silence is violence. But if you do celebrate it in any way at all, apparently, then you're doing it wrong, and you're further demonstrating your racism.
Well, silence is violence, and saying the wrong thing is violence or its equivalent. Therefore, your choice is to repeat after us. And yep. The problem is there's then no basis whatsoever to object on because what's being said is incorrect, which almost all of it is, or because the policy proposals that are being advanced are going to lead to the destruction of things on which we are all depending. There are lots, and this, of course, happened to us in Microcosm at Evergreen.
Yep.
Because the primary, among the many objections, I would say the primary objection to what was being advocated was that it would destroy the college, and that lots of people, including us, including our students, including the very people that they were claiming to be helping, were depending on the college being functional, and driving it into bankruptcy wasn't going to help anybody. So
that's right.
Was there language at Evergreen to say that you were actually about to cripple the college and that nothing that you're talking about could possibly be accomplished if you do that? Nope, because the very fact of objecting meant that they were going to portray you as racist.
Yes, because the movement has named itself cleverly, and this is not the first time we've seen this. There are many examples of movements like this. Antifa is one. Frankly, pro-life is one. But anti-racist, no, actually not. I'm here to say I'm anti-racist, and that does not make me racist. No, because the movement is named in a way that is designed to trap you. And so to go back to the book specifically for just a couple of moments, if you don't view race as the single most defining feature of the human experience, you are, according to the book White Fragility, both racist and in denial. Used to be, of course, that viewing everything through a racial lens was what made you a racist. Well, times change, don't they? So this book is a hot mess of sloppy scholarship and cherry-picked data, but that's not actually its biggest flaw. Let me just quote D'Angelo herself here a couple times from the book. She says, "I have been unable to hide my surprise that the black man is the school principal. Of all white people," she writes, "I realize that we see ourselves as entitled to and deserving of more than people of color deserve." Wow. She's right about one thing. She's racist. Like, Robin DiAngelo's actually a racist. And it seems that it's possible that it's her personal racism that is projected on all the rest of white America at the moment that's given jet fuel to riots that started as protests that were good faith and had a germ of necessity at the core of them, that we now have a totally chaotic and undefensible movement. So if you don't share Robin DiAngelo's racism, as in fact the vast majority of Americans don't, your defensiveness at being misunderstood and caricatured, as many of you who have had to sit through some of these workplace trainings will have experienced, that's going to be held up itself as proof of your racism. And your desire to defend yourself against false claims being evidence of your white fragility, your white supremacism, is in fact, it's another rhetorical trick, and it's, I think, the central Kafka trap of the entire book. You are X. No, I'm not. By denying that you're X, you've proven that you're X. Classic Kafka trap, and that's the only bit of argumentation in the book that she actually engages in.
So I like this model. It makes a lot of sense to me. Here's the question I have. Mm-hmm. So I don't assume that Robin DiAngelo is well-intentioned. She's obviously getting quite wealthy, advancing this particular wrong set of ideas. Yeah. It is possible, though, that, we have argued that people have better access by orders of magnitude to what takes place in their own mind than they do to the next closest mind to them, right? You can see into your own mind, not perfectly. There's lots of stuff that happens in our minds that we can't see, but but we do have some access to what goes on inside of our own minds. So Robin DiAngelo, looking into her own mind, has discovered some completely preposterous stuff, and
offensive.
Offensive if you look at it. Yeah. And it's. I'm not sure I would say it was racist, because the question is, does she want to see it that way? It's clearly prejudiced, right? But the point is,
I've been unable to hide my surprise that the black man is the school principal. I mean, these are just two. It's riddled throughout the book.
Oh, right.
But that's her speaking.
So she clearly has this prejudice. These are the examples
she has shared.
Right. Well, here's the point. She has effectively portrayed all. She doesn't know what's going on in other people's minds. Yeah. So having looked into her own mind, maybe she's just decided, her mind is a good model for everybody else's, and it isn't.
She's put a mirror up to herself and then declared that she put a mirror up to society. And she's trained as a sociologist. Putting a mirror up to society is what sociology is supposed to be. Of course, sociology is long since captured and ridiculous. Not everyone. There are some excellent sociologists out there. Nicholas Christakis being one.
Sociology suggests it's more scientific than it is. I would say she's on the sociopath.
Oh, good.
I don't know. It was inexpensive, so I just thought I'd try it out.
Yeah, so you did.
Are those crickets?
Yeah. We still need that cricket audio.
We need the cricket audio. Yeah, but anyway, it does seem like she is projecting, and one would imagine that she knows better than this. But even if she doesn't, how tragic is it that we are going to grind civilization to a halt over a misunderstanding over whether what goes on in Robin DiAngelo's mind is a good match for what goes on in everybody else's mind? So I don't know. It's stunning.
Yeah.
I will point out,
Yeah.
a friend of ours on Twitter may have solved the problem, cut the Gordian knot, as it were, with respect to white fragility.
Oh, wow.
So somebody had asked
who is this?
what to do in the case their employer was insisting that they read white fragility.
Sure.
And Dave suggested that the answer to this was, I'll read that if you'll read 1984, which struck me as a very good answer.
Thank you for your work. I am a person of color working at a religious private school. I just signed up for a book club to read White Fragility with colleagues who are mostly female, white, upper class, etc. Any advice? Wow.
Buckle up.
Yeah, buckle up. First of all, your description of the demographic descriptors of the other people who are in this book club is telling and is typical. It does tend to be pretty much middle class and upper class white women who are promoting this particular book, this particular screed that is so filled with hatred and ridiculous thinking. And that, why that might be is a conversation not for right now, but for another time. But I would say at one level, you play the idiocy of the book to your advantage in order to get them to listen to you. If you are the person of color in the room and you are listening to us and therefore at least have some suspicion that the book is not what it claims and is divisive rather than unifying, if they start disagreeing with you, point out that they actually have no leg to stand on in this room because you are the person who is suffering rather than them. I just don't see anything dishonorable in playing their game on them at the point that they would insist on winning, regardless of whatever else is true.
I might come at it slightly differently, but in part, we don't know what you mean by POC because let's say you're Asian.
And we also don't know
you will be blamed.
But from your name, I can't tell if you're male or female. And so that's going to be probably more effective if you're female, although frankly, a woman pushing back against other women is going to play very differently. You're going to have to use different strategies than a man pushing back against a group of women.
But I would say, if by POC you mean that you're black, then maybe it's a marvelous opportunity. Now, it's certainly not an opportunity without risk. But imagine, for example, that the approach you took was, I've read the book, I don't believe it. And as people in the room are trying to insist that they are racist and are trying to come to grips with it, and that it is the kind of problem that must be addressed and can't be addressed, and all of the other contradictions that these people espouse, you might just call them out in their own interest. And they might hear you trying to liberate them from this set of circular idiocies, right? If they heard you saying, you know what, I hear you asserting that you're definitely racist because you're white. In my experience, that's not how it worked. I mean, that's just not the nature of it. So
now you began with a caveat, and basically, unfortunately, if your lineage making you a person of color is East Asian, and this doesn't show up in White Fragility, but it's certainly in the ideology, probably what will come back at you is, well, Asians are a tool of white supremacy as well, which is a line that we ran into at Evergreen, and is quite common. It's absurd and ridiculous and offensive and all of these things, but you're most protected against the idiot ideology. The darker the skin the darker your skin is in this case. It's ridiculous.
Hello, Doc. You don't imagine that if you are black, do not imagine that because you are black, you will be safe. I would say it depends on one of two things, or maybe it depends on one primary thing, which is if the people pushing the ideology are really in the room, rather than people who are a victim of this ideology, that is to say they are being forced into admitting things that aren't true. If the people who are leading it are there, then you're in for special punishment because claiming that you don't see it is going to be viewed as very damning.
Yeah, but he or she has said book club, so maybe not.
So the chances are that you're dealing with basically people who are engaged in embracing a zombie ideology, but the people who are selling it aren't there, in which case you might be able to liberate them.